Now that we have a better understanding of how Dreamweaver works with and creates CSS, it's time to focus on learning the CSS itself. Now, we won't be able to cover every detail of CSS. It's a really big subject. But we're going to cover the basics so that this foundation can carry you for the remainder of the title. I recommend checking out the other CSS titles on the lynda.com online training library for a more thorough exploration of CSS. Now, the most basic and fundamental selector in CSS is the element selector. Put simply, the element selector allows us to restyle an element based on its tag. To restyle our paragraphs, for example, we simply use the P selector. Now, there are pros and cons to using element selectors. One of the things that make them so powerful is that by using them, we're affecting all of those elements, not just specific ones. That means that restyling the P tag changes all paragraphs site-wide. This can save a tremendous amount of time, but rarely do we need all paragraphs to look exactly the same. Thankfully, to deal with that, we have additional selector types that can help us out. Before we move on to those, let's practice creating a few element selectors. So I've opened up the element selectors.html file, and we have a couple of elements on the page that we want to style. We have a heading 1 tag, we have some paragraphs, and we have another heading 1 tag a little further down the page. Well, one of the things that I want to explore, in addition to creating paragraph tags, is the concept of inheritance. And it's certainly easier to understand once you see it, so let's just go ahead and write our first element selector. I'm going to go over to my CSS Styles panel, and the little page icon down here in the lower right-hand corner of it with the plus symbol is New CSS Rule. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, the New CSS Rule dialog box allows us to write styles based on which selector type we're looking for. Notice, for example, at the very top we have a pull-down menu that allows us to create class selectors, ID selectors, tag, and compound selectors. Well, element selectors are often referred to as tag selectors, so that's the one I want to choose for what we're doing here. So I'm just going to choose tag selector. Now, you may have noticed something different come up in this little pull-down menu below that. I had heading 1 come up. You may see a paragraph or some other element. Whatever you're currently selected on or whatever you're focused on in Dreamweaver, that element is going to show up. Actually, I'm going to style a tag that's much higher up in the page order. I'm going to style the body tag. Now, I can either type that in, or I can grab it from the pull-down menu. You can go through a list of all your available tags and choose it that way. Now, the body tag is the parent tag around all visual elements. So by writing a style for the body tag, we're going to use the concept of inheritance. Inheritance says that any property placed on a parent tag is inherited by its child tags. Now, what that means is if we applied a color, for example, to body tag or font size or a font family, then everything inside of it would be that family, that size, and that color. Now, that sounds great, but it can be a little tricky because not all properties are going to inherit, and they're not all going to inherit exactly the same way. So it takes a little getting used to before you feel like you're fully in control of inheritance. Now, I can define this rule in an external style sheet, or I can embed them in this document. For this particular lesson, we're going to do it in this document only. That will embed the styles on this page, meaning they will only apply to this document. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And from the CSS rule definition dialog box that comes up, the first option I'm going to change here is some typography options. So I'm going to stay right within this category. And for font family, I'm going to grab the pull down menu there, and I'm going to choose Georgia, Times New Roman, Times, and Serif. Now you might be wondering why we've chosen 5 fonts there. This is something called a font stack. And in the chapter on controlling typography with CSS, I'll talk about font stacks in more detail. For font size, I'm going to choose 100%. Now, again, I typed that in 100%, but you can also use this unit of measurement pull-down menu beside it to choose from all these available units of measurements, pixels, points, ems. We typically use percentage for the body tag because what that will do is it sets the entire page's font size relative to the user agent. So if a browser has its default font size set to 16 pixels, that's what our default font size is going to be. We're just saying 100%. It also helps us get around some tricky rendering errors in Internet Explorer, so it's a good idea to go ahead and use percentages when you're working with the body tag. Now for color, I'm just going to go ahead and type in #666, which is a dark gray. So now we're going to have Georgia Times New Roman, Times or Serif as our font. Our font size is going to be 100% of whatever the user agent's default font size is going to be. And then for color, we're using sort of a dark gray. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and notice how everything on my page changed, the headings and the paragraphs. they all inherited those values. So our headings are 100% of the size that they would normally be. The paragraphs are 100% of the size that they would normally be. They're all using the font Georgia, and they're all that dark gray. So now we get a little bit more specific by targeting those specific elements that are still on the page. In this case, we're going to do the heading 1. So I'll go right back to my CSS styles panel. I'll click on New CSS Rule. And once again, I'm going to go to Tag for my selector type. And once again, I'm going to choose H1 or type in H1 for my selector name. So all you have to know is the name of the tag that you're controlling and type it in right there after you've chosen Tag from the pull-down menu. Once again, for rule definition, make sure it says this document only and click OK. Now here, we're going to make some changes. Maybe I would like my document site-wide to be in Georgia, but for my headings, I might want those to be in a sans serif font. So I can actually overwrite what the body tag is doing by telling the heading 1 tags, no, you need to be Arial. So go ahead and grab your font family pull-down menu and choose Arial. Currently, right now, we're telling our headings to be their default size because the body tag just basically said be 100% of what you would normally be. But if you want to take more control over that, you can. For font size for my headings, for example, I'm going to tell it to be 1.2, and then I'm just going to type in EM for M's. If you hit Tab, you can see that in the pull-down menu there. So we're going to discuss M's in more detail when we talk about units of measurement in just a little bit. Just understand that M's are a relative unit of measurement, but once again, it's basically telling a heading be relative to the size that you would normally be in the user agent. We're also going to change the color of our headings. So I'm going to go right in the color dialog box and type in #600, which is sort of a deep burgundy color. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now take a look at what happens to my headings. They shrink down a little bit, they change color, and they change fonts. So we're still inheriting some of the things from the body tag, but for the most part, we almost did a total overwrite with our heading 1 styles. Now, the whole concept of using inheritance means that you don't have to write a lot of styles for your child tags. So we're going to write a style for our paragraph selector, but we're really not going to have to do a lot with it. So I'm going to go right over to my CSS styles panel, choose New CSS Rule. Once again, I'm going to choose Tag from the pull-down menu, and I'm just going to type in P for paragraph. Make sure it's referring to this document only, and click OK. Now, our paragraphs are the font we need them to be, and they're the color we need them to be. They're inheriting that from the body tag. So all we need to do is change the size. So I'm going to make the size 1.2 M's, EM, and go ahead and click OK. Now, our headings are 1.2 M's, and our paragraphs are 1.2 M's as well. They're pretty much the same size, and that's kind of cool. You get to take control over the sizing of elements. As a matter of fact, if you really felt like it, you could make your paragraphs larger than your headings. It's really up to you when you're working with CSS. If you've taken a moment to scan and read the text that's on the page, you can see that some of the text needs styling that doesn't match what we've just done. If we were limited to just tag or element selectors, we wouldn't be able to achieve this. Now, thankfully, we have additional selectors available to us, and we'll use one of those, the class selector, in our next movie.